You've started before, not once, multiple times. You know exactly what it feels like to begin, the clarity, the energy, the specific kind of confidence that comes from finally deciding to move. You've felt that. Recently, probably. Maybe more than once this year alone. And you've also felt what comes after it. The quiet, the slowdown, the day you skipped that turned into a week, the week that turned into a month. And then the version of you that exists on the other side of that collapse, the one who doesn't talk about the thing anymore, who changes the subject when it comes up, who has quietly filed it under things I'll get back to, knowing full well that you won't. You're not lazy. Stop hiding behind that excuse. It's too easy and it's not even accurate. You start. That's actually the thing. You have enough drive to begin, enough vision to see what's possible, enough energy to move. And then something happens not outside you, inside you, that dismantles it. Every time. With different projects, different goals, different versions of the plan, the same ending. And the gap between who you keep starting to become and who you actually are right now, that gap is getting harder to ignore. Here's the question that should be keeping you up at night, and if it isn't, it should start. What if the problem isn't that you quit too soon? What if the problem is that everything you've been doing, all the starting, all the planning, all the effort, was never actually moving you forward to begin with? What if you've been confusing movement with progress your entire life? Sit with that. Because the answer changes everything about why you keep ending up here. There is an enemy at the center of every cycle you've run. Not circumstance, not bad timing, not the economy, the algorithm, the market, or the people around you who don't support your vision. Those are real variables. They are not the enemy. The enemy is called performative momentum. You've never heard it called that, but you've lived inside it for years. Performative momentum is the experience of feeling like you're moving when you are in fact standing still with a lot of visible activity happening around you. It is the neurological trick your brain plays when you fill your hours with effort-adjacent behavior planning, researching, preparing, organizing, consuming, discussing, and mistakes the feeling of busyness for the reality of progress. It feels like work. It produces the biological signals of work. Your heart rate rises a little, your focus narrows. You feel the specific fatigue at the end of the day that you've learned to associate with having done something. And so your brain rewards it, files it under productive day, lets you sleep with a relatively clear conscience. But the scoreboard hasn't moved. The business hasn't been built. The savings haven't grown. The project hasn't advanced. The skill hasn't deepened. All that motion, all that genuine, sincere, exhausting motion, and the thing you said you were building is exactly where it was 90 days ago. Here's where performative momentum becomes truly dangerous. It doesn't just waste your time, it steals your urgency. When you spend 4 hours doing things that feel like progress, you lose the psychological pressure that could have driven you to do the one thing that actually was progress. The urgency that should have been sitting on your chest, uncomfortable and demanding, got quietly discharged into activity that looked right but produced nothing. And then you wonder why, after a full day of working on your goals, you feel no closer to them. You're not imagining it. You're not being too hard on yourself. You are genuinely running in place and calling it a workout. But here's what makes performative momentum nearly impossible to escape using standard self-awareness. It's designed to look exactly like the real thing. The person next to you, the one who is actually building something, who will be somewhere completely different in 2 years, is also busy, also working, also spending long hours on their goal. From the outside, your days look identical. Same laptop, same coffee, same focused expression, same end-of-day fatigue. The difference is invisible until it isn't. And when it becomes visible, when the gap between where they are and where you are finally becomes undeniable, your brain will reach for an explanation that protects you. It'll say they got lucky. They had better resources. They had connections you don't have. They had something you weren't given. The real explanation is simpler and harder. They stopped confusing movement with progress before you did. And every day you don't make that same distinction is another day the gap widens. Let me describe your week honestly. Monday arrives with its own reset energy. The weekend is behind you. The new week feels like a clean slate. You open the Notes app, the spreadsheet, the project folder, whatever form your goal currently takes, and you feel something close to recommitment. Today is different. This week is serious. You spend the first hour organizing, not building. Organizing, renaming files, restructuring the folder, rewriting the plan you already wrote in a way that feels cleaner, more actionable, more like what a serious person's plan should look like. The organization feels productive because it is technically related to the goal. You are touching the goal. Your hands are on it. 2 hours in, you've produced nothing new, but the folder looks excellent. Then comes the research phase. You need to understand the landscape better before you move. You need to know what others in this space are doing. You need to watch 3 videos about the thing you're doing to make sure you're approaching it correctly. This is due diligence. This is being smart. This is not the impulsive, underprepared launch that fails. This is the careful, informed approach of someone who has learned from past mistakes. 6 hours later, you have 14 open tabs, a mild headache, and a stronger sense that other people are doing this better than you. That's not research. That's hiding inside the permission structure of research. And then comes the conversation phase. You tell someone about the goal. Maybe a friend, maybe an online community, maybe a journal entry addressed to no one. You explain the vision, the plan, the timeline, the potential. You feel the energy of articulating it the way saying it out loud makes it feel more real, more possible, more like something that exists in the world rather than just in your head. Your brain, hearing you describe it, partially believes you've already done it. The neurochemical reward of sharing a goal is measurably similar to the reward of achieving it, which is why people who talk most about their plans tend to build the least. The talking discharges the pressure. The pressure was the fuel. By Thursday, the week that was going to be different looks like every other week. Not because you weren't trying, not because you don't care, because every action you took was movement, genuine, effortful, time-consuming movement that was not progress. And here's the brutal arithmetic of that pattern. You have a finite number of weeks left in the season of your life where this particular goal is still achievable. I don't know what that number is. You don't either. But it is not infinite. And every week that runs the pattern above is a week subtracted from that number without a corresponding deposit into the thing you're building. The clock is not paused while you prepare. The clock has never been paused. And the question underneath all of this, the one you haven't let yourself fully feel yet, is this. How many more weeks are you willing to spend moving without progressing? Before we go further, let's take apart the tools you've been handed. Because you haven't been doing nothing. You've been doing what you were told to do. You've followed the standard playbook for someone who is serious about their goals. And the playbook is broken in ways that are specific, structural, and almost nobody in the self-development space has the honesty to admit. The first broken tool is goal-setting culture. You've been told to set goals, specific goals, measurable goals, time-bound goals. You've written them in journals, built them into apps, structured them into quarterly reviews. And every time you set them, there is a moment of real clarity, a feeling of alignment between what you want and what you're doing that lasts on average about 11 days. Here's what goal-setting culture never told you. A goal is a destination. It is not a vehicle. Writing down where you want to go does not move you 1 inch toward it. And the act of writing it down, of making it specific and measurable and time-bound, produces enough neurochemical satisfaction that the brain partially counts it as progress. It isn't. It is a map with no engine. And worse, the more detailed the goal, the more fragile it becomes. Because when life disrupts the timeline, and life always disrupts the timeline, the goal feels broken. The specific, measurable, time-bound target that required specific, measurable, time-bound conditions is now out of alignment with reality. And the brain, which needed the goal to look like the plan, now needs to rebuild the plan before it can act again. More planning, more movement, zero progress. The second broken tool is accountability culture. You told someone your goal. They check in. You report. You feel the mild social pressure of someone else knowing your business. And for a few weeks, the social pressure works. You do the things because you don't want to have to explain why you didn't. But accountability culture created a substitution you didn't notice. The question you should be answering every day is, did I move the actual needle? Instead, you're answering, did I do enough to have a satisfactory check-in? These are not the same question. One is about output. One is about appearance. And when the goal becomes having something to report rather than something to show, you will find activity that satisfies the report without advancing the result. You become productive for your accountability partner, not for your goal. The third broken tool is the just start philosophy. Just start. Take imperfect action. Done is better than perfect. Ship it. Move fast. The first version is always bad. That's fine. Just get something into the world and iterate from there. This is true, partially, for a specific kind of person in a specific kind of situation. For someone who never starts, just start is life-changing advice. For someone who starts constantly and can't sustain, which is exactly who you are, just start is kerosene on the fire, because you already start. Starting is your skill. Starting is the easy part. Starting produces the rush, the novelty, the identity hit of being someone who is doing something. You have started this goal or a version of it multiple times. Starting is not your problem. Sustaining is your problem. And just start has nothing to say about sustaining. It was never designed to. It's advice for starters. You need something different. The fourth broken tool is the content diet. Podcasts about discipline, videos about high performers, interviews with founders, books about systems and habits, and the morning routines of extraordinarily successful people. You consume this content with genuine hunger, not entertainment hunger, learning hunger. You want to understand what they did so you can do it too. But here's what the content diet produces that nobody talks about. It produces an increasingly vivid picture of who you should be, alongside an increasingly frustrating awareness of who you currently are. And that gap, the gap between the person in the content and the person watching it, doesn't motivate most people for long. It demoralizes them. Because you can spend 3 hours consuming content about taking action and end the 3 hours having taken none. And your brain, which knows this, adds a quiet entry to the ledger. You are someone who studies success, not someone who creates it. None of these tools are wrong in isolation. All of them are broken as a complete system for someone who starts strong and quits, because not one of them addresses the actual mechanism of quitting, which means if that's all you have, you are going to quit again. So what stops the quitting? Here's where everything shifts. And I need you to hear this not as a tip or a technique, but as a fundamental reorientation of how you've been understanding your own behavior. You have felt, at some point in your life, maybe recently, maybe years ago, a pull towards something. Not manufactured interest. Not I should do this because it makes sense. A genuine, specific, recurring pull toward a particular direction. A particular kind of work. A particular kind of life. Something that, when you imagine it clearly, produces a feeling in your chest that is unlike the feeling produced by anything else. That pull is not random. That pull is not a fantasy your brain invented to torture you with the distance between desire and reality. That pull is information. It is the most accurate data your internal system has about what you are actually built to do, about where your effort, applied consistently and in the right direction, would produce something real. Most people spend their entire lives treating that pull as a wish, as something to be pursued when conditions are right, when resources are sufficient, when the timing is better, when they feel more ready, and conditions are never quite right. Resources are never quite sufficient. Timing is never quite better. Ready never quite arrives. Here's what nobody tells you about that feeling. It has an expiration date. Not because the desire dies, desire is remarkably durable, but because every time you feel the pull and don't follow it, your brain updates its prediction about what following it produces. Nothing. Delay. Eventually, you will go back to what you were doing before. The pull is real. The action is temporary. The return to baseline is inevitable. And after enough cycles, the pull itself becomes painful rather than energizing, because it no longer just points toward what's possible, it points toward evidence of what you haven't done. It becomes a measure of your own unfinished business. That is one of the quietest and most devastating things that happens to people who start strong and quit. They don't lose the desire, they lose the relationship with it. The desire stops feeling like possibility and starts feeling like accusation. But here's the reframe that changes the architecture of everything. The pull you feel, that specific itch toward the specific thing, is not a measurement of what you want. It is a measurement of what you are capable of. Desire doesn't arise randomly. It arises in alignment with capacity. You feel pulled toward the things you have the specific internal architecture to actually build. Not easily, not without cost, but genuinely, structurally capable of. The itch is not your imagination running ahead of your ability. The itch is your ability announcing itself before you've proven it. And every time you quit, every time you move without progressing, every time you start and don't sustain, you are not failing to reach something beyond you. You are abandoning something that was already yours. That's the reframe. Feel it land. Tell me in the comments, what's the pull you keep ignoring? The specific thing that keeps showing up regardless of how many times you file it away. The one you know isn't going anywhere? Name it. Not for me, because your brain needs to see it named in the place where you've been hiding. Now here's how you stop quitting. Not with motivation, not with accountability, with a system that works specifically for the person who starts strong and falls apart, built on principles that address the actual mechanism of collapse, not the surface behavior. The first principle is called the direction audit. Most people who start strong and quit are not quitting because they ran out of energy. They're quitting because they were never moving in the right direction to begin with. And movement in the wrong direction, no matter how energetic, produces one guaranteed outcome: exhaustion without a rival. Here's how misdirection works in practice. You feel the pull. You start. You build momentum around a version of the goal that is adjacent to the actual goal, but not the goal itself. You start the podcast about your passion instead of building the business your passion could support. You build the brand instead of the product. You develop the aesthetic instead of the skill. You write the plan for the book instead of the book. These are not wrong actions in isolation, but they are second-order actions dressed up as first-order actions. They are the preparation for the thing rather than the thing. And because they're connected to the thing, they feel like progress. They are movement, not progress. The direction audit is a single, honest question asked before any action. Is this the thing, or is this the thing that surrounds the thing? If it's the thing, do it now, completely, before anything else. If it's the thing that surrounds the thing, it goes on a secondary list that only gets addressed after the thing has been touched today. Not because preparation is worthless. Because for the person who starts strong and quits, preparation is the primary escape route. It is the most sophisticated, most justifiable, most invisible form of avoidance available to an intelligent, ambitious person. The direction audit closes that escape route. But here's what happens when you actually start doing the thing directly, without the preparation buffer. It's harder than the preparation was. Immediately, viscerally harder. The preparation had structure. The thing itself has resistance. Real resistance, the kind that doesn't resolve with more research or better organization, only with continued, uncomfortable output. And the resistance is the first thing the quitting mechanism uses against you, which is why the second principle must be in place before the resistance arrives. The second principle is called the resistance contract. Here is the most important thing to understand about why you quit. You quit because resistance arrives and you experience it as a signal that something is wrong. that the difficulty means the direction is wrong, that the discomfort means this particular version of the goal isn't right, that the friction means you should reconsider, adjust, maybe start over with a better approach. This is the most expensive misread of information available to a person building something. Resistance is not a signal that something is wrong. Resistance is confirmation that something is real. Easy things produce no resistance because they produce no result. The resistance you feel when you sit down to actually do the work, not the preparation, not the planning, not the organizing, but the actual output producing work is the nervous system's response to genuine effort in a genuine direction. It is friction against something solid. It means you are pushing against something that pushes back, and things that push back can be moved. The resistance contract is a decision made in advance, in a calm moment before the resistance arrives. The contract says, I will not interpret resistance as a signal to stop, reconsider, or change direction. I will interpret resistance as confirmation that I am in the right place doing the right work. I will continue through the resistance for a specific minimum period, not until it feels better, not until it resolves, but for the committed duration regardless of how it feels. The minimum period matters. It cannot be open-ended, because open-ended commitments are renegotiated when conditions change. The minimum period is specific. 20 minutes, 1 hour, 30 days, whatever unit is appropriate to the scale of what you're building, but committed to in advance, in writing, before the resistance has arrived to cloud your judgment. When resistance arrives, and it will arrive, every single time, without exception, you don't evaluate it. You execute the contract. This is not suppression. You can feel the resistance completely. You can acknowledge it, name it, experience it fully. The contract doesn't require you to feel differently. It requires you to act the same regardless of how you feel. That distinction, acting the same regardless of how you feel, is the exact mechanism that separates the people who build from the people who start. Not talent, not inspiration, not superior motivation. The practiced, deliberate, contractual decision to continue through the feeling rather than be governed by it. But the resistance contract has a specific point of maximum vulnerability, and if you don't know where it is, it will take you down every time. The maximum vulnerability point is day 8. Not literally day 8, but somewhere in the first 2 weeks of any genuine effort, after the novelty has worn off and before any visible result has appeared, there is a specific 4-8-hour window where the gap between effort and evidence is at. It's most psychologically painful. You've been working. Nothing has appeared yet. The lag is real and the brain is running its cost-benefit calculation and finding no visible return. And in that window, the quitting mechanism makes its strongest play. Not with an argument you can refute, with a feeling you can't ignore. The feeling says, this isn't working. It's not a thought you can reason with. It's a somatic experience, a heaviness, a flatness, a specific kind of tired that is different from physical fatigue. It's the feeling that effort is being consumed by something that will not produce. That feeling is lying. Not about the feeling itself. The feeling is real, about what it means. The feeling means you are in the lag. The lag is the period between consistent effort and visible result. And the lag is not evidence that the effort isn't working. It is a structural feature of every real building process. The lag exists because results compound. Compounding is invisible in the early stages and undeniable in the later ones. Quitting in the lag is the specific error that keeps results perpetually beyond reach. You quit before the compound effect becomes visible. You restart. You hit the lag again. You quit again. The results remain theoretical because the behavior never runs past the lag. The resistance contract held through the lag is what changes this. But even with the contract, even with the direction audit, there is a third mechanism of quitting that neither of these addresses, and it's the one that takes down the people who make it past the lag. The third principle is called the identity inventory. Here's what happens when you've been running a start-quit cycle for long enough. Your identity, the settled, unconscious self-concept that runs beneath every decision you make, has absorbed the pattern, not as a failure exactly, as a fact, as a description of what kind of person operates this body. The kind who starts, the kind who doesn't finish, the kind who has a lot of good ideas and a thin record of completed ones. That identity is not a verdict your conscious mind handed down. It's a conclusion your prediction system reached based on the accumulated evidence of your own behavior, and it runs automatically, beneath your awareness, shaping every action you take. The identity inventory is a weekly practice, not daily, weekly, of examining the evidence your behavior is producing about the kind of person you are becoming. Not the kind of person you want to be, the kind of person the evidence currently supports. This is the most uncomfortable thing I'm going to ask you to do, because for most people running a start-quit cycle, the honest inventory looks grim in the early weeks. The evidence supports someone who tries and stops. The prediction is unfavorable, and the temptation is to skip the inventory, to avoid looking at the data, to feel the feelings without examining them. Don't skip it, because the inventory has two functions. The first is confrontation, seeing the pattern clearly enough that the cost of continuing it becomes undeniable. The second is detection, identifying the specific moment in each past cycle where the quitting began. Not where you officially stopped, where the drift started, where the first small compromise appeared, where movement began replacing progress without you noticing. That moment is almost always the same across your cycles. It has a signature, a specific kind of thought, a specific shift in behavior, a specific renegotiation of the commitment that felt reasonable at the time. Finding that signature means you can recognize it next time before it's completed its work. You can see it arriving and name it for what it is, rather than experiencing it as a natural and inevitable conclusion. The identity inventory is how the pattern becomes visible, and a visible pattern can be interrupted. An invisible one cannot. The fourth principle is what ties the entire system together. The fourth principle is called the proof deposit. Every day that you do the actual work, not the preparation, not the planning, not the organization, but the output producing, resistance generating, uncomfortable work of building the actual thing, you make a deposit. Not into the goal, into the identity. The proof deposit is a deliberate, conscious act of acknowledging the completion, not celebrating it, not performing gratitude about it, acknowledging it, registering the fact that today you said you would do the work and you did the work, that the version of you who made the commitment and the version of you who executed it were the same person, that your word to yourself held. Most people skip this. They finish the work and immediately shift focus to how much is left, how insufficient today's output is relative to the total distance, how someone else would have done more, how the result is still invisible. They spend the deposit the moment they earn it. The proof deposit requires receiving the completion, letting it count, adding it to the inventory not as something to be proud of in a performance sense, but as data accurate, honest data that the prediction system can update against. One deposit, small, one vote in the other direction, then 2, then 10, then 30. And somewhere in those 30 deposits, without announcement, without fanfare, without a dramatic moment of transformation, the prediction updates. The identity shifts, not from someone who quits to someone who never quits. That's a declaration, not an identity. From someone who has quit more than they've continued to someone whose recent evidence points toward continuing. That shift is quiet. It is also irreversible once it happens, because identity built from evidence doesn't collapse when conditions change. It doesn't depend on feeling good or being supported or having the right environment. It is a conclusion drawn from data, and the data doesn't disappear when you're tired. Now I'm going to tell you what happens after the shift begins, because this part, the part that comes after awareness, after the decision, after the first week of real progress, is where the most ambitious people fall. Not beginners, The ones who actually understood what I just said and started implementing it. The old identity doesn't accept its displacement quietly. It will come back dressed as wisdom. It will arrive in the form of the most rational-sounding thought you've ever had about why this particular approach needs to be reconsidered, why the direction needs adjustment, why taking a short break right now, given everything that's happening, is actually the strategically sound decision. It won't feel like quitting. It will feel like maturity. You will be 2, 3, 4 weeks into genuine progress, real deposits, real evidence, the direction audit working, the resistance contract holding. And you will feel a pull toward a different version of the goal, a refined version, a smarter version, a version that incorporates everything you've learned in the past few weeks and would, if you started fresh with this new understanding, be so much more effective. That thought is the most dangerous thought available to someone who starts strong and quits. Because it is not wrong. The refined version probably is smarter. The new understanding probably is real. The improved approach probably would be more effective. But starting over with the improved version means one thing above everything else. It means the current streak of proof deposits ends. And without those deposits, the identity evidence resets. Not to zero, the brain doesn't fully erase pattern data, but the momentum of the current streak, which was in the process of building a new prediction, breaks. And broken streaks are harder to restart than unbroken ones, because the brain has new data. This person also stopped this version. You will face this moment. I am not guessing. Every person who genuinely starts building hits this specific temptation at the point where the initial energy has been replaced by something quieter and more durable, and the old identity makes one final sophisticated play to reclaim control. When it arrives, you do one thing. You make the proof deposit for that day, and you do not make the decision until tomorrow. Not because tomorrow will be different in any meaningful way, because the thought that arrived today was generated by the resistance, by the lag, by the old identity doing its last and best work. And decisions made in that state have a specific failure rate that decisions made after one more day of deposits do not. One more day. Always one more day before any decision to change direction. In most cases, the thought won't survive the day. Let me describe who you are on the other side of this. Not the outcome, the internal experience, the daily reality of someone who has broken the start-quit cycle and built something real in its place. You wake up, and the first thought about your goal is not dread, not excitement, not the performance of enthusiasm you used to generate to get yourself moving. It's orientation, a quiet, settled, almost boring sense of direction. The way someone who has been walking a long road stops thinking about whether they're going the right way and simply continues. Not because doubt is gone, doubt is always available, but because the evidence has accumulated to the point where the doubt no longer carries decision-making authority. You do the work on the days it feels like nothing. Not heroically, not with a speech about discipline or a dramatic reminder of your why. You do it the way you brush your teeth, not because you feel passionate about dental hygiene, but because you are the kind of person who does this. And that identity is now load-bearing. It holds the behavior in place without requiring motivation to prop it up. You experience setbacks differently. A missed day doesn't trigger a collapse. It triggers a single simple thought. Tomorrow the streak resumes. Not because you're suppressing the self-criticism, you can feel it. It still arrives, but it has lost its authority. It arrives, says its piece, and leaves. It doesn't get to make decisions anymore. You relate to other people's success differently. The comparison that used to arrive like a gut punch, seeing someone else further along in the direction you want to go now, arrives as information they've been depositing longer than you. The gap is a function of time and consistency, not of fundamental difference. And since you are now depositing consistently, the gap is a feature of the present, not a verdict on the future. You stop talking about what you're building. Not because you're secretive, because the talking no longer serves a function. You used to talk about the goal, because talking was a substitute for building, a way to experience the reward of the goal without doing the work. Now the work is happening. The reward comes from the work. The talking is unnecessary. And slowly, then suddenly, in the way that every compounding process works, the thing you've been building becomes visible. To you first, then to others. Not as a finished product necessarily, as evidence of something real in progress, as undeniable proof that the person who used to start and quit has been replaced by someone who started and continued. That person is not a different species from who you are right now. That person is who you are right now, minus the one habit of stopping when the resistance arrives. Everything else, the intelligence, the drive, the vision, the pull toward the specific thing you're meant to build, that was always there. That was never the problem. The problem was always the stopping. And stopping is a choice. So here we are, at the end of the last video you watched before you decide what kind of person you actually are. Not who you want to be. Not who you're working toward. Who you actually are. Defined by the only currency that matters. What you do when no one is watching, when the feeling is gone, when the resistance is real, and the result is still invisible. You have started before. You know how to start. Starting is not the achievement it never was. Starting is the entry fee. Everyone pays it. Millions of people pay it every Monday morning, every January 1st, every time a new idea arrives with its original energy intact. Very few people pay what comes after. What comes after is not dramatic. It is not a montage. It is not the version of persistence you see in movies where the music swells and the training gets harder and the face gets more determined. What comes after is Tuesday afternoon when nothing is going right and the work is mediocre and the result is still nowhere in sight and there is absolutely no feeling available to support continuing. And you continue anyway. Not because you're stronger than other people. Not because you've unlocked some secret about discipline. Because you made a contract with yourself before Tuesday arrived and you are the kind of person you have now proved through deposits that you are the kind of person who honors that contract. That is the whole thing. That is the entire distance between the life you've been living and the life you've been starting toward for years. Tuesday afternoon. No feeling. Continue anyway. You've been confusing movement with progress your entire life. You've been busy, you've been trying, you've been visibly, exhaustingly in motion, and the scoreboard has barely moved. Because motion and progress are not the same thing. They never were. And you know that now. Which means the next time you sit down to work on the thing, the actual thing, not the preparation for the thing, you will know exactly what you're doing and exactly what you're choosing. You will know whether what you're about to do is the work or the appearance of the work. And that knowledge is either going to save you or haunt you, depending entirely on what you do with it. You don't need a new plan. You need to stop stopping. If you're done being the person who starts and quits, say it in the comments. Not for me. As a contract with yourself. The one word that means you're done negotiating. And if this is the content your mind has been waiting for you, know exactly what to do.